What I'm about to tell you, I have never said out loud before, not even to my best friend. But secrets have a way of eating you alive from the inside, and I have carried this one long enough. So today, I am telling you everything, and I mean everything. My name is Emma. I was 20 years old, newly married, living alone in a house that felt too big, too quiet, and too empty without Michael in it. He was in America, building our future, sending me voice notes every night before he slept and every morning when he woke up. I used to fall asleep with my phone on the pillow next to me just to feel less alone. That particular night, I had tried reading, tried watching something, tried anything to stop the clock from ticking so loudly, and then came the knock at the door. I remember the exact sound of it, 3 slow knocks, confident, like someone who already knew they were coming in. It was Uncle Robert, Michael's uncle. He stepped inside with that easy smile of his. I had felt uncomfortable around him before. He said he just wanted to check in, that he was worried about me being alone. He was charming, casual, filling the room with conversation the way people do when they want you to stop paying attention to what they're actually doing. And then he offered me a drink, said it would help me sleep. I was so tired and I accepted it without a second thought. I drank it, and that is the last clear memory I have of that night. I woke up the next morning to a room that was too neat and a mind that was too foggy. Hours had simply vanished. I told myself it was exhaustion. I told myself I was overthinking. The feeling that something inside me had shifted in a way that could not be undone. When I finally went to the doctor, I sat in that chair staring at the wall while she looked at me with that particular softness that doctors use when they are about to change your life. "Emma," she said, "you're pregnant." I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I just sat there while the world rearranged itself around me into a shape I didn't recognize. I told no one. I carried it alone for days, trying to figure out what to say, how to say it, whether Michael would understand, whether anyone would believe me, whether I even fully believed myself. Truth does not wait for you to be ready. Uncle Robert made sure of that. He had recorded something from that night. I don't know how. I don't know when. But he had it, and instead of using it to threaten me or control me, he did something I never expected. He sent it directly to Michael, not out of guilt, not out of remorse. He sent it to watch everything burn, because there are people in this world who, when they take something from you, need to make sure you have nothing left to rebuild with either. Michael called me. I answered on the second ring, and he said my name, just my name, Emma, in a voice I had never heard from him before. I won't tell you what happened next between Michael and me, not yet, because that part of the story, what he said after the silence, what I confessed, what we chose, that is not a story about betrayal. That is a story about something far more complicated, something that will make you question everything you think you know about trust, about loyalty, and about who is really responsible when someone becomes a victim. But I will leave you with this. A few weeks after everything came out, I found out something about Uncle Robert that changed the entire shape of what had happened, something that explained why he had chosen me, why he had chosen that night, and why Michael had never questioned his uncle's behaviour before, not because he didn't care, but because he didn't know something that the rest of the family had spent years keeping hidden. It started with a phone call from Michael's mother. She had heard everything by then, the pregnancy, the video, the collapse of our marriage that everyone had watched happen in slow motion without knowing how to stop it. She called me one afternoon when I was sitting alone in the kitchen. Her voice was strange from the first word. She asked me how I was. I told her I was managing. And then she went quiet for a long moment. She opened it. She told me that Uncle Robert was not who the family had presented him to be. She said those words slowly, making sure I heard each one. "You were not the first, Emma. There had been another woman, years ago, before Michael was old enough to understand what he was witnessing. A woman who had been close to the family. That woman had never spoken publicly. She had been quietly paid, quietly moved away, quietly erased from the family's story the way inconvenient truths always are, folded up and buried somewhere no one would think to look. The family had known. Not all of them, but enough of them. Michael's father had known. 2 of his aunts had known. And they had made a collective decision, the way families sometimes do when protecting their name feels more urgent than protecting a stranger, to say nothing, to keep Robert close, to watch him carefully, they told themselves, to make sure it never happened again. But that is not how these things work. You cannot supervise a predator into becoming a decent person. You can only create the conditions for the next victim. And the next victim, it turned out, was me. When Michael's mother finished speaking, I didn't say anything for a long time. I was thinking about something Michael had said to me once, early in our relationship, when I had asked him why he seemed uneasy around his own family at gatherings. He had said he didn't know exactly, that there was always a feeling, something he couldn't name, like a note played slightly off-key in an otherwise normal song. He had grown up with that feeling and learned to ignore it because no one around him ever acknowledged it. No one ever said, "Yes, you're right, something is wrong here." So he had filed it away under imagination and moved forward. He had married me, brought me into that family, and when I told him Robert made me uncomfortable, he had repeated the same thing everyone had always told him. "It's nothing, it's family, you're overthinking it." He had not dismissed me because he didn't love me. He had dismissed me because he had been trained his entire life to dismiss that feeling. And the people who had trained him to dismiss it were the same people who had known what Robert was capable of and said nothing. That knowledge did something to me that I wasn't prepared for. It didn't erase the pain, it didn't undo the pregnancy, or the video, or the sound of Michael's voice saying my name in that hollow, quiet way. But it shifted something. The shame I had been carrying, that crushing, suffocating shame that made me feel like I had been foolish, like I should have fought harder, spoken louder, refused more firmly, that shame began to loosen its grip. Because I understood finally that I had not walked into a moment of bad judgment. I had walked into something that had been constructed carefully, over years, by people who knew exactly what they were doing and had decided that their comfort was worth more than my safety. I called Michael that evening. It was the first real conversation we had managed since everything had collapsed. I told him what his mother had told me. I heard him breathe, just breathe, for almost a full minute without speaking. And then he said something I will carry with me for the rest of my life. He said, "Emma, I am so sorry I told you it was nothing. I knew something was wrong my whole life and I let them teach me to look away. And then I asked you to look away too. That is something I will never forgive myself for." I didn't tell him he was wrong to feel that way. I didn't rush to comfort him or tell him it was fine, because it wasn't fine and we both knew it. But I told him the truth, that I didn't blame him, that I blamed the silence. The years and years of carefully maintained silence that had allowed one man to move through a family like a shadow, untouched and unchallenged, because confronting him would have required everyone to admit what they had chosen to ignore. We are not back together. I want to be honest with you about that. This is not a story that ends with a reconciliation and a sunset and everything neatly resolved. Real life does not work that way. What we are is something more complicated and more honest than that. Two people who went through something devastating, who are slowly, carefully, figuring out what remains between them once the shock has cleared and the anger has settled, and all that's left is the truth of who you actually are to each other. The baby is real. The future is uncertain. And Uncle Robert, for the first time in his life, is being made to face what he has done, because I refuse to be the next woman who was quietly paid and quietly moved away and quietly forgotten. I am telling you this because silence is not protection. Silence is permission. Every time someone in that family looked at Robert and looked away, they were not keeping the peace. They were writing the conditions for the next victim, and I am done being quiet about that. I am done folding my instincts up and burying them somewhere polite. I am done making other people comfortable at the cost of my own safety. And here is the thing I need you to sit with, the detail I told you at the beginning that you might have missed. When Robert knocked on that door that night, he knocked 3 times, slow, confident, like someone who already knew they were coming in, not like a visitor, like someone who had already decided how the night would end before it had even begun. That is not the knock of a man acting on impulse. That is the knock of a man who has done this before and gotten away with it every single time. He chose that night because Michael had just told his family he would be unreachable for the next 48 hours due to a work situation overseas. Someone in that family passed that information to Robert. Someone made a phone call or sent a message or simply said the wrong thing to the wrong person at the wrong moment. And Robert showed up at my door 3 hours later. I don't know yet who made that call, but I am going to find out. And when I do, that is a story for another day.